wrong, Robin? Tired, dizzy?
I had a strange feeling, Batman. As if visions of sugar plums were dancing in my head.
They should be, Boy Wonder. It's almost Christmas. Ho, 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 ho.
Welcome to Gotham City, Mr. Claus.
Why, call me Santa Claus, Batman. Everybody else does. Say, you tell me where the Batcave is, and I'll leave a little present in your stocking.
If you can't trust Santa, whom can you trust?
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey!
Jingle bells, Batman smelt, Robin laid an egg. The Batmobile lost the wheel, and the Joker got away.
Welcome back, my friends, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here. And yes, we're continuing along here with our look at our Batmas episodes, as I'm calling it here, the 12 Days of Batmas, in which, for the most part, we're looking at issues of the old detective and Batman comic books, or even World's Finest, and seeing how we could adapt some of these into Batman 1966 episodes, as the producers did during the first season, mostly the first season. There were a couple of second season ones as well of Batman. And today I'm bringing on someone who you've heard on the podcast before, although it's been a while now because we've been doing some other things outside of Batman 66 on the podcast here. He's a published author. He's a podcaster himself with his own podcast presenting the transcription feature. Please welcome back Mr. Kevin Lauderdale. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, John. How's it going? Merry Batmas.
Yes.
Jingle bells. Jingle bells, Batman spells. That's not a Christmas carol. That's not appropriate.
But it is appropriate to say Merry Batmas. I can't imagine anybody having that issue with that.
Season's Batmas. Batmas greetings.
Batmas greetings.
Batmas greetings, citizen.
What day is it, sir? Today it's Batmas Day.
Today it's Batmas Day. Do you know the comic book stand down the block, the first block but one? I should hope I do. Do you know the spinner rack, the one that's twice the size as me, sir? Indeed, intelligent child, a delightful child.
Oh, so yes, we're going to talk about Detective Comics issue 110 from February 22nd, 1946. Now, Kevin, first off, because I put it out there to the bunch of you, and I let you guys pick. Why this one? What stood out to you in terms of the elements here? Because, I mean, we're going to get into the details, but what stood out?
I wanted to find something that was particularly weirdish. I didn't want to just do a Riddler story or a Joker story. So I literally Googled like strangest Batman comic book issues. And I saw the cover and I was like, wait a minute, that's if you look at a distance, that's Sherlock Holmes. What's Sherlock Holmes doing on the cover? There's a guy in a deerstalker cap and a pipe. It's like, this looks interesting. And so I dug into it. Sherlock Holmes is not a character. Moriarty, for certain shades of Moriarty, and we'll talk about how Moriarty this guy is the bad guy. It takes place in England, in London, in Londinium for the TV show. And I'm an long-time Sherlock Holmes fan. You probably remember, one of the first things I ever did on this network was a Sherlock Holmes roundtable. Was that, God, 10 years? I don't remember when. That was a long time ago. So I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, and as much as I appreciate the stuff they, quote, got right, there's also a lot of stuff that's, quote, wrong, but that's okay because it's all pop culture. And I love the illustrations in this one. And I'm like, hey, you know what? There's room for some really good stuff. You couldn't adapt this directly, but there's a bat boat in this one. You get to reuse some stock footage from the Londinium larcenies. Yeah, this would make a prime episode of Batman 66.
Yes. Now, it's interesting because this was written by Don Cameron with pencils by J. Winslow Mortimer. And once again, I'll just reiterate here, getting all my information from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Link is in the show notes. If you want to find a particular issue, when it was published, who wrote it, basic story synopsis for it, throughout the entire history pretty much of comics, check out Mike's Amazing World of Comics website. It's really good. It's funny you mentioned, Kevin, the Batboat, because this was the issue that introduces the Batboat.
far out. It's a lot different looking from the one that we see in the movie. And is it making an appearance in the TV show? I know it's in the movie.
It does. Stock footage.
It's got. It looks like a fan on the back. It's like those things that fly around in Florida, the hydroplanes in Florida, the gators cruising around. It's got a very wooden deck. It's the HMS Batboat. It's not Batman's Batboat. It's a gift to him from the British government for use on the Thames. And you don't make an episode of Batman 66 and not use the River Thames, unless of course it's the Londinium larcenies, which did not use the River Thames. But it's a stylish looking for 1940s. This is a stylish looking piece of technology. I like it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I did a little digging up on the history of the Batboat, and this is the first appearance of something officially called the Batboat. And some listings say, "Oh, Batman was tinkering with other boats in the past." He went on boats. He didn't own a boat, at least so far, because I've been reading through the 40s. I'm up to 1944 at the moment. He didn't have a boat that was officially his. He had the Batplane. He had the Batmobile. In fact, as I've commented elsewhere, it's interesting to note that he flies around more in the Batplane than he does ride around in the Batmobile. But this is the first official, and it is, like you said, tricked out by Her Majesty's government there. HMS, right? What is that? Her Majesty's Service. Okay. Batboat. So complete with, and again, something else not as prolific. I would be the right word. I think we're pro. I'm trying to think of the word. Just visible in the comic books. A Batarang. They have the what is it? The Batarang gun. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We got to talk about a lot of things to talk about. Number one, I can see where in the comics a plane is cool, a car is cool. Like boats aren't particularly cool. They're not particularly modern tech. They've been around since the dawn of time. So I can see where it's like, if you want to do cool stuff for Batman, give him a plane, give him a car. Skipping over the cover for just 1 second, that first image, which has Batman and Robin and a police officer on the Batboat, and they've shot the Batarang around. We're going to find out are criminals, and they've got the bad guy Moriarty around the neck. It's like they're going to either chop his head off, a la Force 10 from Navarone, or they're going to pull the guy and his two goons off the bridge into the River Thames. It looks particularly deadly, and of course, a big splash page. This is not exactly the scene that we see later on in the comic book, but it looks like it's a promising action. I'll tell you that much. It really gets you excited.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this, because something else that I noted as I'm reading through this is that it seemed to me like they were trying to suggest that Holmes and Moriarty were real life characters in the Batman universe, or was I misreading that?
They're really canny about this. So first of all, on the cover is someone who you might recognize as Alfred, dressed up in a deerstalker and with a calabash pipe, or you might not. So it looks like Bobby is saying, "My word, what on earth's that?" As Batman and Robin run down the streets near the Houses of Parliament. And then the Alfred/Sherlock Holmes character says, "You mean to say you haven't heard, old boy? Batman and Robin are working with Scotland Yard in this episode." Mm-hmm. So and then we scroll down, and we're going to jump around a bit. Mm-hmm. Alfred comes along with Batman and Robin to England, and we'll jump back. But it says, to Alfred, Sherlock Holmes was more than a fictional character. He was a real person. I don't know if it's meant to be taken literally. That's the editor's note. Mm-hmm. But I think it means that Alfred interprets Sherlock Holmes. He actually dresses like Sherlock Holmes. He goes to 221B Baker Street. We could easily say to ourselves, to John and Kevin, Batman was more than a fictional character. He was a real person. Why? Because we're spending all of this time on podcasts and books and analyzing this and analyzing that. And so I imagine Alfred is a real Sherlock Holmes aficionado. And so I don't know if it means a real person. Now, jumping back, when we get to Moriarty thinks, "I'm a great criminal. That namesake of mine, Professor Moriarty." Mm-hmm. And he's reading a copy of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. He knows it's fictional. I think that the Moriarty, they're taking inspiration. Alfred and Moriarty are taking inspiration from these characters. I don't think they're really real. I mean, doesn't somebody say something like, "Those characters only exist"? Oh, I think Moriarty says Sherlock Holmes only exists in the works of Conan Doyle.
Okay.
He says there never was any Sherlock Holmes except in Conan Doyle's brain. But they're pushing it. These two fellows have drawn a little, maybe too much inspiration, but it's all in good fun.
Right. Yeah. Now, like I said, we're trying to see about like fitting this in as a 66 show. And there are a lot of elements here that work out really well and fit the beats of a 66 show. And I could see this, a return trip to Londinium, Venerable Ireland Yard, we'd have to say instead of Scotland Yard. But I have a little problem with the very beginning. As you say, we're promised lots of action, and we are. We get a demonstration from Batman and Robin of their fighting techniques with some of the law enforcement officers of Londinium there. And I have to wonder, would that whole scene play out in an episode? Because Dozier was always very cautious about making sure Batman always appeared, good. Even when he's faking being bad, he's never like seen doing a robbery or something. He's just acting tough.
Can you even begin like in media res in an episode of Batman 66? Like, can you open up with a huge fight going on? I don't seem to recall anything like that. Or do you always have to have a sort of setup to begin with?
I would say for the sake of pacing, the setup might be better if we actually saw Moriarty committing the crime first, and then let's call Batman in. But it's not unusual to do an in media res. They did one with the Penguin where he was already shooting his film when Batman and Robin interrupt him and actually thinking it's a real crime he's committing. So they start beating everybody up on the set.
Yeah, it is a fake out. I mean, the first few panels are Batman and Robin being put in handcuffs and fighting who we will soon find out are British police officers. I mean, I suppose, it would bend people's minds. Or you could have William Dozier narrating. Mm-hmm. So you see the fighting going on, and William Dozier, what's this? Batman actually committing a crime? Batman fighting against the side of justice and truth, and then instantly, oh, just kidding, everybody. Mm. It would be pushing the rules. It would be pushing Dozier's rules, but maybe with a bit of a narration, you could get away with it.
Right. Right. Exactly.
I mean, it grabs your attention. Certainly grabs your attention. And the kids, this fight scene would not go on for 5 minutes. It would go on for 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly it would break up and Batman would go, don't worry, everybody. That was a wonderful demonstration of our skills. I do have a question, if those of you reading along. So Batman and Robin sort of escape by throwing their handcuffs over some sort of pole. What is this pole doing? And perhaps this is like an Avenger or a X-Men workout room or something like that. But what are these poles doing here? Just sticking out of what possibly could be an operating theater. I'm not really sure. Over here in Venerable Ireland Yard.
Right.
Like, what's going on? Those flag poles? If so, why aren't there flags on them? Their method of escape is a little flimsy. We may have to change that for the TV show.
Right. Right. And as you said, it sort of goes in media res, and then we kind of have to go back. That's something we've never done before in Batman 66. Sort of like, okay, a few hours earlier or a few days earlier, whatever, like we see that often now with television, but it never happened in Batman 66, in which basically we are introduced to Moriarty, and he says, he's going to take on the crimes of his fictional counterpart there. The thing I have a problem with this whole setup is that really, other than in name Moriarty, he doesn't do anything that's identifiable as the crimes. In fact, it's been ages since I've read any Sherlock Holmes. I had to go into, my little Wikipedia and what have you. Moriarty himself was only a character, if I'm not mistaken, a character in 2 stories.
That's absolutely right. He's in 2 stories. He's in The Final Problem, and he's in one of the books. I think it's Sign of the Four. But
Valley of Fear.
Valley of Fear. Thank you. And he's only really. He's never seen by Watson. Watson sees him vaguely at a distance. Everything we know about Moriarty, we know secondhand from Holmes. He's mentioned in several other stories. But because he's my great nemesis and Napoleon of crime, well, you don't really see much evidence of that, Conan Doyle. Other people have made a whole bunch. He's like the fact that the Joker constantly appears in the movies, while Moriarty constantly appears in Sherlock Holmes movies because he's the great nemesis. He's Napoleon of crime. You wouldn't get it by running the numbers and counting the number of times he's in stories.
Mm-hmm.
Also, adapting my methods is what this Moriarty said. What are his methods? His methods are not getting caught. His methods are getting other people to commit the crimes. And the crimes are things like shooting Holmes, trying to run him over with a hansom cab, dropping a brick on him. I mean, these sophisticated methods aren't really something that phrase applies more to Holmes than it does to Moriarty. But of course, this is a very light pop culture thing. This comic book, this Batman 66, people aren't going to know, quote, aren't going to know that. They're not going to, they're going to know, oh, Moriarty is the Napoleon of crime. They may know Moriarty is Holmes' nemesis. That's good enough. You can play with the text. I mean, this comic book text actually gives you more of an idea of what's going on. Oh, he's my namesake. Oh, I'll adapt his methods rather than just having Moriarty literally sitting around someplace else, being the spider in the center of the web and having other people do stuff. We don't want to see Colonel Sebastian Moran doing something in a Batman thing. We want to see Moriarty doing stuff. And Moriarty gets some action in here. He's running around. He's shooting people. He's jumping off boats and swimming in the Thames. This is a much more active Moriarty than in the Conan Doyle stories where he's an aged professor. Although they did draw him nicely. Holmes is described as describes Moriarty as, tall, slim, domed head, and the Sidney Paget illustrations. This is a very appropriate looking Moriarty in the comic book. I like that. Is now a good time to talk about who I'm going to cast as Moriarty?
If you want to, we can definitely get into that here. Sure.
I do, because I'll be changing a few more things in the script. So I played around with this a lot. First I thought, okay, so somebody British, active in the 1960s. Well, I'm not going to get Laurence Olivier or something like that. I'm thinking because I thought my first thought was, this would be funny. Let's get Michael Caine, because Michael Caine grows up to play Alfred in the Nolan version. I thought Michael's a bit too stocky. Let's get somebody maybe Alec Guinness. And that's an interesting thought. And I thought, no, let's get somebody a little bit older. I'm thinking like Alistair Sim, who people might know as Scrooge in the movie Scrooge from the 50s. And then I'm thinking, wait a minute, what am I doing? I need somebody tall, slim, British. Isn't there somebody already on set who is tall and slim and British? Why, yes, Alan Napier. Plus, we've already established that Alfred has a cousin living in London, Cuthbert. And if 1960s television has taught us anything, it's about identical cousins. So for the purpose of this episode, Alfred's cousin Cuthbert has turned to a life of crime and adopted the nom de crime of Moriarty. I'm going to have Alan Napier play both roles, and I'm hoping that by not having to shell out $2,500 for a guest villain, we can afford a couple of special effects split screen shots of the two of them together, I mean, can you just hear William Dozier's narration? What's this? A second Alfred? I think it's going to work great.
I like that. And it makes it so much easier. You don't have to worry about anybody, coming down and saying, well, that because I had two only that and once you describe Moriarty, I'm like, one is already off the table, that being Leo McKern.
Oh, Rumpole. Oh, yeah. He's Mycroft. He's not Moriarty. He's not Moriarty.
And then the other one, but he's on the younger side, and he's just starting out in the business, Malcolm McDowell.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah, if you could maybe age him up, or just ignore the fact that the professor is an older gentleman with a slight stoop and a domed forehead. That's good casting. That would be nice.
Yeah, he's at this point, he's only 3 years in the game, and he's still over in England. Just in fact, I in looking him up, I was so surprised to find out his very first role was in the 1960s when on in through the 80s soap opera Crossroads.
Wow,
you got to start somewhere.
Everybody does.
Yep. So, all right. So let's say we do take then that with Alfred, because then it makes it even all the more interesting, because in the comic, after the demonstration, after the whole, we brought Batman in and all, Alfred goes out because he's told, keep your distance from us. We can't have the connections going on. So he goes out dressed as Holmes and visits Baker Street, where he does some or tries to do some deducing based on things he just sees on the streets. Litter.
Right. Right. Batman and Robin have been called over, just like in the Londinium larcenies, by the president, by Venerable Ireland Yard / Scotland Yard. They've sent out I love this illustration. It's an urgent plea spans the ocean as surely as if Scotland Yard had flashed forth their own bat symbol for a transatlantic searchlight.
Yes.
They're called over to go help out. Alfred is packing Batman and Robin's outfits. He has his own little outfit. He's got his own little cutaway coat and his deerstalker and his pipe. And yeah, he wants to go visit 221B Baker Street. And again, the illustrations in this are really nice. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good Georgian townhouse there. Just for notes, 221B Baker Street doesn't actually exist, never has. It's currently occupied by a large office building that at least used to, as an insurance company, used to have a full-time staff, well, one guy, whose job was to answer all the letters that got sent to 221B Baker Street with some form letters and things like that. Next to it, a couple houses down, is the Sherlock Holmes Museum, which I think is like 239 Baker Street. So he goes out. Alfred goes out. So we have this would be good. We could dress up Alan Napier as Sherlock Holmes. He's going out. He's checking stuff out, and then cut to our first appearance. Here's Moriarty and his gang in the building across the street from 221B Baker Street. And I can't decide whether that's clever, whether that is following the Sherlock Holmes' dictum of hiding in plain sight, or if that's the stupidest thing in the world. We're going to hide right opposite. I'm going to call myself Moriarty. I'm going to hide right opposite the one place every Sherlock Holmes fan is going to go looking.
Are they, though? That's the whole thing. He even points it out himself, that this is the one last place that they would think to come looking around, because it's so obvious.
Then that is applying Conan Doyle's and Sherlock Holmes is hiding in plain sight. Very nice. Yeah. And there's the bad and his goons who are delightfully dropping their H's. That's so delightfully British. There, he's out there hunting us, or is he? Who? Speak up, fool. It's Holmes, or so his spirit. And so Moriarty looks out and sees indeed somebody investigating all the stuff that's going on. He's like, it's a cigarette butt you dropped, you idiot. Oh no, we got to go out there before he connects the two and finds out we are here.
Yes. Yeah. And they nab him right on the street, which, that works in terms of Batman 66, because how many times have we seen people grabbed in the middle of the street and just taken away, and it just seems there are no witnesses.
Yep. And if I was going to make a two-parter, and by the way, so my episodes would be called Moriarty Returns and Batman Astern, reference to the rear of a ship.
Okay.
If I was going to split this up into a two-parter, I would have Alfred's kidnapping be the end of episode 1, because it's halfway through the story, but it's also a dramatic high point. Now, the thing that's missing in this comic book, of course, is a death trap. And what they're going to do, we're going to find out Moriarty is planning on doing, is getting some information out of Alfred and then not bumping him off, killing him. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you want to make a death trap, do you want some sort of Moriarty, a giant teacup, it being British? Did we do a giant coffee thing, a giant like the samovar or something like that? Was that a death trap?
There was with Catwoman.
Or alternately, I suppose if you're a Moriarty and you're really getting into the Holmesian stuff, there could be you could have a giant edition, the 10x10 book of some Sherlock Holmes stories, or you could have a Hound or something like that. If we're going to be cheap, because we're doing Batman 66, I'm envisioning either Alfred being lowered into a giant teacup or being pressed to death between the pages of a giant edition of Sherlock Holmes stories.
I think the teacup might work better only because we've also already had the giant book in the first season.
Oh, is that the bookworm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, two ways of looking at it. One is originality, and the other one is, hey, we've already got a giant book lying around there in the storeroom, which we used 2 seasons ago. So
that's true. Quick redress of it in the as a collection of Holmes's short stories or what have you there.
Right.
It's interesting you point this out, because that was the one thing I was going to say, was that we needed to pad this out a little bit, because there is another point later on that could have worked as a death trap, but then the ending goes by so quickly that, you know, you're like, okay, we're going to need to pad that out. So if we were to make this point the point for the death trap, I would definitely say we need the introduction to see Moriarty doing a crime, and then the call, and after credits, then we'll have Batman doing. It's not as shocking as it is in the comic book, but it does allow for a better pacing to lead up to this being the death trap, so to speak.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so then episode 2 would begin with Batman and Robin saying, "Oh no, well, no, they need to free Alfred." Which we'll need a couple of minutes where they somehow free Alfred. Maybe there's a chip in the cup, and somebody can crack it and knock it out and drain the cup or something like that. I'm going to leave that to the Writers Guild, the union members, to fix that for me. But,
see, that's the one thing I do like, though, too. It's because how do they find Alfred? It's just simply, their escort in all this. What is he called? I forget the ranking there, but Gao is his name. CID? CID,
Criminal Investigation Department. Yeah,
right.
I think it's like Detective Gao.
Right, Detective Gao. He brings them to Baker Street as just like a. Actually, I don't know why he does, but since they're there, that's when Batman discovers the broken magnifying lens on the ground, and they quickly start putting together 2 + 2 when they see, and Gao's even looking at them going, "You're just making fun of me here now with this," because he's basically in Holmesian style deducing even the height of the man who was dragged away, and Robin's there like going, "You're describing Alfred, Batman."
Yeah, that's really good. It's not only the Holmesian style; it's Batman finally being the world's greatest detective. He doesn't do all that much detecting, I think, in the Batman 66. I always feel like a lot of it's left to chance or the computer. But yeah, he's like checking out people's feet, the number of footsteps in the dust. Yeah. And yeah, he says this man is based on that. He's 5'9", slightly limp, as if he has corns. Mm-hmm. But then they're able to follow the prints lead off in this direction. And really, they just go upstairs where Alfred is basically just tied up with a sheet and some ropes over his head. And when Batman interrupts Moriarty and his crew escape. They just leave Alfred there still tied up, which is a very unsatisfactory way to save somebody. You go up there and the bad guys have left. And they just left our guy here. We do need a death trap or something more threatening. The stakes need to be higher.
Definitely. And I think it also sort of, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know it's dark out, because basically the way he gets away is by shooting like this smoke gun that fills the room with smoke. But I just find it odd that it's like you had 3 men there, because now you got Gao as well with Batman and Robin, and nobody, instead they're all tripping over each other, the 3 of them.
If you make the room bigger, maybe we could put a nice little bat fight scene in there. That'd be good. Yeah, our villains escape through this like hidden, almost like the entrance to the Batcave door, which somehow leads them to subterranean streams and tunnels underneath.
Right.
Alfred then talks about the things he heard them talking about. There's going to be a Westminster Hall at 9:58. Mm-hmm. And then Batman's like, Westminster. What does that mean, Gao? Gao, it could mean anything. It could mean the Abbey, the bridge.
His name Westminster. But
the clock tower.
9:58 being so specific, that tells you something on the schedule. And I love that.
And at 9:58, it's not 10 o'clock like you have in America. The British are very precise about things. It's like, what time does that train come in? 8:42. It's like, no, it's not coming at 8:30. It's very specific. That is very British and very nice. And then... this is such a strange scene. Who's Batman talking to? He calls somebody on the phone. He says, what's that? You say gold ship was expected on Cheapside around that time? Fantastic. It's like, who is he calling?
Yeah.
Well, operator, tell me everything you know about 9:58.
That's where we'd have to go back to Venerable Ireland Yard, and I forget the name of Gordon's counterpart there when they did Londinium larcenies there, but that's who he'd be calling and saying, can you get me the schedule of trains and what have you that would be coming in the Westminster area around 9:58 or something like that.
Oh, John, how could you forget? It's Superintendent Watson.
Oh, that's right.
Maurice Dalleman, who has a long list of British roles on American sitcoms. He's almost always the butler. He's in Bewitched. He's in Nanny and the Professor. He's in Paycoat Junction. He's in The Monkees. He's even, not as a butler, but as a background character in an episode of The Jack Benny Show.
Chief Inspector Watson. Wow.
Don't forget that.
We need to play him up a little more, though, then.
Yeah, so again, we could have him at the beginning, like when the fight is over with. He could come in and say, "Oh, thank you very much, Batman and Robin, for showing us your brilliant American fighting techniques. Those were remarkable." And again, he could be on the guy on the phone. We could cut to him in his office, which is one of my favorite lines from Londinium Orson. I love that bit about, wow, all police chief offices throughout the civilized world pretty much look exactly alike, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that bit. Just with some different trappings in there and such. Mm-hmm. And it would be an opportunity if they'd done it here in the comic book. It would be an opportunity to expand on that and draw. I mean, if they had, that kind of thing back then. But it's funny because they get away because basically Robin trips over Gal in the darkness and Batman holding on to him and what have you. And then they get Alfred and it's like he tells Alfred, go away. And you think, okay, Alfred's going to listen. But no, and this is the thing we got to figure out too, because our Alfred usually does listen. So he has to have a better motivation than just, as we see later on, I saw that flash and now I'm climbing up the side of the Parliament building to figure out what's going on the roof.
Perhaps Alfred could get knocked in the head, wake up, see himself wearing a deerstalker and carrying a pipe, and say, oh, I'm Sherlock Holmes. Wait a minute. And yet I know all the things about Batman and the crime is about to take place. I'm going to go help my American cousin Batman solve this crime.
Or what if, I like that, but what if also just the simple fact of the matter is that's his family? Like you said, if we go with Cuthbert, he's got to.
Oh, that's good.
To save his cousin from doing any more damage.
Oh, that's excellent. Like Batman may have told me to go home and take a rest, but this is my family. My family honor is at stake. If one Pennyworth is going to commit a crime, another Pennyworth is going to stop it.
Right. Yeah, that might be the way about going about it. It's just a matter of family honor, a matter of family pride, and making sure he doesn't go too far and damage the name of Pennyworth.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Next shot is hours pass. Now, I'm still not sure what's going on exactly. So beautiful shots of the Houses of Parliament, by the way, the Palace of Westminster throughout this. Great drawings. The very next page panel is, as Big Ben strikes 10, a rocket streaks from the top of the Great Tower of the Houses of Parliament, and we see it exploding. And then there's the thing about the gold shipment being stopped. What exactly is the rocket explosion purpose? What does that have to do with the gold shipment being stopped and our bad guys robbing the lorries?
Other than a distraction, I can't think of any reason why they did that. It doesn't explain it.
It's not. The best I can come up with is like the explosion is going to like destroy one side of the bridge once the truck is on it, and then their cars come up and block the other side of the bridge. I don't understand that panel or why there's an explosion there, and it would cost much too much to reproduce through special effects. So we're not going to have that in this episode of Batman 66. But the gold shipment is waylaid, and our criminals grab apparently only 2 or 3 boxes of gold, not a whole lot, and slink down to their awaiting speedcraft on the River Thames.
Yes.
Only to be chased immediately by Batman and Robin in HMS Batboat right behind them.
Now, what I could see happening here, though, is that they would use the actual Batboat from the 66 show, would not have a tricked out version of a British version, because they didn't do it with the Batmobile either. They managed to actually transport the Batmobile across the ocean in the cruise liner that Bruce and Dick and Alfred were traveling in to go to Londinium the first time. So I could imagine it being the same thing. The only thing is we would have to spend a little money, which we did save by using Alan Napier, shooting some shots of the bat boat on the River Thames.
Yeah, we can reuse a lot of stuff. The problem is, I want to reuse as many stock shots as possible of the bat boat because there really aren't that many. The problem is, of course, it's an unseasonably bright and clear day in every single bat boat shot we already have, whereas this is taking place at night. Maybe we can run these through some processor to darken some of the imagery. Or we can have William Dozier narrate with the very bright lights to accompany these street lights of London illuminate the River Thames as Batman chases Professor Moriarty and his villainous goons down the River Thames. I don't know.
Well, in the Londinium episode, at one point, he does comment, it's an unusually sunny day in Londinium.
There's a lot of unusually sunny days and a lot of, well, not exactly palm trees, but I'm pretty sure some of those London roads are leading us up to Santa Barbara. But we do get a really clever bit here, which is the Batarang shoots out from the bat boat around like a flagpole or something on our escaping villains, linking the two of them together so that the villains cannot escape. No matter how fast they go, they're going to drag the bat boat with them. I think that's incredibly clever. And we get our first really big action shot, which is Batman leaping from the bat boat onto the villain's skiff. That's going to be Adam's going to maybe have to do some wire work, or we'll get some stuntmen in there. But if you can envision two boats speeding along, there's going to be a lot of rear projection.
Yes. Yeah, I was just thinking that, a lot of rear projection.
So we'll have a lot of rear projection. Maybe the boats will actually be standing still, but there'll be a rear projection showing the River Thames shooting by at 20 knots an hour, and Batman leaps from one boat to another. That's a big dramatic shot. I love that. Yeah,
I do too. And it allows him to, basically, as Robin's still steering the boat, round up most of the men except for Moriarty, who dives overboard and makes a swim for it and heads back to the Parliament building, where the only other member of the gang left, the one who shot the rocket, Lodi, is waiting for him.
I can't imagine swimming through the River Thames at night in a full three-piece suit and bowler hat. That's just, and it's never referenced that he's wet or anything like that. It's like, Batman, I guess, takes over the villain's boat, drives up to the docks of London, and I guess we can try to reuse the dock scenes that we have. The British docks in the Londinium episodes were out there on the Fox lot, not the Santa Barbara ones. The Santa Barbara dock that was used in the movie, we know that.
Right.
So I could have a scene of Batman steering, pulling up to the docks, harnessing. What's the right word where you attach your boat to the land?
Just to dock it, or to I can't even think of it. I think
there's a special term, isn't there? Where you like wrap a rope
when you
we're both landlubbers.
I know, right? I know this term, and I can't think of it now for the life of me.
Okay, so we can have a good shot of Batman getting out.
There's people screaming at us right now.
Yeah, that's right. All of you who've read all the Master and Commander books are like, you idiots, it's this. Right, so Batman, this is actually really clever. The next scene it's a dramatic shot. It's beautiful. And talk about a Dutch angle. There's a great angle from above. Batman goes into the tower of the Houses of Parliament, the tower of Big Ben. And there's this wonderful aerial shot of him coming up like Hitchcockian sets of stairs, and there's busts of famous British people made of marble all around him. It's a great setup for what's going to happen next.
Exactly. I missed that though at first. I was like looking at it going, great shot and everything, but wonderful little piece of foreshadowing.
This is cleverly written and illustrated, I gotta say.
Yeah.
And then Professor Moriarty pops up, and there's his one remaining goon, and the two of them are on the roof. And I don't know what their plan is, unless it's just escape. I assume the money in boxes, the gold, is still on their boat, which Batman captured. Their goal now is just to try to escape and to defeat Batman. I don't know. And Moriarty pulls out a gun. He is going to shoot Batman in the head as soon as he comes up from that flap onto the rooftop. Cut to Alfred. Yeah. Literally climbing the outside of the tower. If he's going to the roof, he's going up several hundred feet. He's got his deerstalker. He's got his calabash pipe. I was thinking, could we do a window gag? Could we do a tower window gag? There are no window. I don't know. There might be windows in the tower that leads up to Big Ben. I don't know.
Okay, but here's the question: if you do, who is in the tower at that time of night? I mean, mind you, that was never logic in Batman. Like, for instance, when they had, I believe it was Dick Clark throwing a party in police headquarters. As they're going up the side of police headquarters, there's Dick Clark poking his head out, and there's music playing. So logic didn't always play into this.
Who is
66? Actually, you want to know who it could be? If you really, I mean, I don't know how well known. I think it wasn't until the 70s. But if you had Patrick Troughton pop out.
In 1960, yeah. When was Doctor Who on the air?
Doctor Who was on the air, and 66, 67, we're talking Patrick Troughton. Hartnell's already moved on.
And it's a clock. I assume they're going to the top of Big Ben. There are other towers, but that's a time reference. It's like, what are you doing here, sir? Oh, you'll always find me where there's time. That's clever. That's good. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny too. I mean, because it's Alfred getting the clock scene this time. And we know he's able to do the climbing because he's done it as Batman. He's actually climbed up in the 66 series in the Batman outfit.
That's great. So we're good. Yay, continuity. Something that the Batman show didn't always stick to, but good.
Yeah.
Just as Alfred climbs over the parapet to the top of the roof, we see this. Again, this is a remarkable shot. Here is Moriarty on his knees with a gun. There's the flash of the gun and a bullet shooting out, hitting Batman in the forehead.
Yep.
And we're like, oh my God. Alfred pops up. It's like, you bounder, you've just killed Batman. And the goon is like, oh, it's Sherlock Holmes' understudy. And he punches Alfred in the face, and his pipe falls. And Moriarty says, oh, I'll kill him too. And then Batman arises. Moriarty, quick, look, it's Batman. You missed him. Impossible. That bullet went straight enough, but it chipped a marble bust I had disguised with my mask and pushed up through the trapdoor ahead of me. And here's another bust for you. That's great. Actually, we missed over a wonderful Adam West line.
Which was?
Which is going back when Batman and Robin bust in on the first hideout opposite 221B Baker Street. Moriarty says, Batman and Robin, you don't belong in England. And Batman, in my best Adam West voice, says, we belong everywhere we're needed. That is so Adam West.
That's true. I'll give you that one. Yep.
Okay, so that was a great setup. As you said, you don't often see it. You didn't see that at first. You're just climbing up some stairs. There's all these busts. Yeah, it's British. It's stuffy. There's always marble busts. But he made a good use of it. But then again, then there's a bit of a bat fight as Batman. Robin, I guess, is still down there taking care of the boat and guarding the gold.
Right.
Punches out the one goon, and then there's something here that confuses me.
Yes.
Moriarty shoots him again. We see again the powder, the flash of the bullet. Batman goes, ugh, and collapses on the ground, dead or whatever, until he pops up again.
Yeah.
He got shot. That bullet went. There's no marble bust in Batman's chest. How did Batman survive that? And the only thing I can think of is and this would be a very Batman 66 thing. You stand, and no, by the way, nobody asks. It's never questioned. How did you survive that second shot? It's just it's assumed.
And we see no wound.
Yeah, there's nothing. I can only have Batman stand up and say, good thing I just purchased a new bulletproof vest. I understand these are of the highest quality. And you can lift up his shirt, and we'd see a little royal warrant, boy by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen. Something like that. But the fact that it's never addressed, never questioned, there's no evidence of it, that's a bit of a miss in this original comic book. But it is clever that Batman puts his hand behind Moriarty and says, drop the gun, the game's up. And he's like, oh no, don't shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we find out in the next panel, Batman doesn't carry a gun. That was the pipe, Alfred's pipe, that had been dropped and fallen on the floor. That's quite clever. I like that.
Mm-hmm. I did too. I like that whole bit there and especially then just like, I don't know, the very ending as I love, and again, it's a typical Adam West thing when they're like, thank you, Batman, for everything you've done. And he's like, no, you get the credit for the case there, gal.
Yeah, they unearth at the Venerable Ireland Yard in our episode a very, very carved of marble Batman and Robin in action, running. I'm not sure how this will work exactly. The only thing that's holding, they're in air, they're in flight in their run. The only thing that's holding their statuary to the base, the pedestal, is two tiny little toes, where Batman's toes are on the ground and Robin's toes are on the ground. I'm afraid they're going to tip over and chip, but I can see that. It's very nice. It's clever that they're another marble, not a bust, a marble full body scenario. So more marble, very British, very lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing I would change up just a little bit in terms of this, because again, they make the reference that Moriarty is committing crimes based on, Moriarty's crimes in the book. And like you say, there's not much to what Moriarty does because he usually sends his people out, but we can say that's part of the change up is that, he himself goes out. The opening shots in part 1 where he's doing the crime, we could take that from Valley of Fear, where in the book, he kills a man named Douglas or has a man named Douglas killed. Instead, we could say he robs Douglas because we don't want to, we don't want to deal with murder here in this. I mean, attempted murder is one thing, death traps is one thing, but having anybody die, with the exception of Molly in the very first episode, which wasn't murder, she just fell to her death. And
poor unfortunate child.
Yes, and our goons in the movie, we don't have anybody else ever die in Batman, so we want to keep that out. So okay, we'll say the opening with the robbery of Douglas, maybe a prominent British citizen, and it's like, oh my goodness, we need help with this one. Let's bring in Batman and Robin. And then the whole idea of the train, that actually is from the shorts. What was the short story called again?
The Final Problem?
The Final Problem, yes. There was a something to do with a train in there as well. So that can play out just as it is with the variations and such that they use in the comic book. I just wish that's the only thing I would have liked to have seen. It just seems to me like they took the gimmick of, hey, Moriarty was, counterpart and such. Let's pit him against the modern day world's greatest detective, Batman. But then it's like nothing else after that other than Alfred running around in a deerstalker with the pipe. I would have liked a little bit more of a nod towards Holmes and Conan Doyle's stories.
Yeah, if we we're going to do this as a TV show, I would actually have Moriarty performing crimes that were inspired by the Sherlock Holmes stories. I mean, he might say to himself, in the books, Moriarty sat by and merely commanded things from a distance. I'm going to actually execute them myself. I'll be more active. And he could do something with a dog theme for the Hound of the Baskerville. You want to pick like the one or two things that are the most prevalent in people's minds. Like if you say Sherlock Holmes, what do you think? Hound of the Baskervilles, Deerstalker, Pipe, things like that. So I would have him seen him committing one or two crimes that were more inspired. In fact, that could be your opening. It could be like William Dozier. What's this? Gigantic dogs turned loose in the Bank of England? What's going on? Things like that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I just feel that you're going to use it. Go lean into it. Don't just simply use the window dressings.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Anything else about this story or turning it into a two-parter that we haven't covered?
No, I think this would be a great opportunity, as we said, to reuse Batboat footage because you got to amortize those costs out. I'd like to see more of the 1960s Londinium footage. Mm-hmm. This would be an opportunity to show a lot more of England. Just call up the stock footage companies like, we need more 60s England. There's because this was written in the 40s, of course. There's no swinging 60s stuff.
Right.
But we could have, I would maybe dress up the goons. And they could either be dressed as 60s cool dudes, or could you dress them up somehow as Sherlockian and like Georgian, late Edwardian, Victorian costumes? I'm trying to think how I'd want to go with that. Do you want to dress? We should dress up the goons some way, either hip 60s or as Victorian, people somehow,
right?
To reflect the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm going to leave that to you guys.
Okay.
Write in, post your comments, and say how would you dress up the goons?
Right. All right, I got to ask one last question here now overall, because you did pick this particular issue that takes a literary character, and we're talking 1966, 67, 68 Batman. Where does Sherlock Holmes stand in terms of the rights? Would we be able to do, today, yeah, I could write a Sherlock Holmes story now. Everything's in public domain with the character, apparently, right? Am I correct in that?
Well, so no. Up to a certain time point, I think it's like 1903 or something. You can use Sherlock Holmes elements in public domain for every story up to year X. I think it's like 1903. So I think every year more and more stories become in the public domain. In the 60s, you're going to have to pay somebody. Well, here's the thing. Right, so you'd have to pay the estate, but you're not using, quote, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is not a character in here. And Moriarty is not a character. It's my namesake. It's not actually Moriarty. I think that's how they got away with it in the comic book. It's like, these are guys who like to dress up like and act like and talk like those guys. And they fully reference the fact that those are fictional creations made by Conan Doyle, and I am inspired by him. I am taking my lead from him. So in the 40s, 50s, and in the 60s, no, you'd have to pay somebody if you wanted to do that.
Okay. All right. So that works. All right, then. So wrapping this up here, I think we've got ourselves the makings of a good two-parter. Possibly, I would have to say, it would have to go into a proposed fourth season, because we're running with the elements from the third season with Batgirl.
So if you want to introduce, do you want to have Batgirl come along, as awkward and inconvenient as that would be? I mean, she had a good excuse in the Londinium episodes.
Well, something that myself and some other people have talked about a proposed in fourth season, including Jim Beard, is that had they gone to fourth season, had they gone to NBC, and had they gone back to two-parters, which NBC apparently, the legends say, was willing to do, the only thing that held up the whole thing was that they'd already struck the Batcave set, and NBC didn't want to pay $800,000 to rebuild it. Was that Batgirl and Robin would kind of interchange. Some weeks Batman would work with Batgirl, some weeks he'd work with Robin. Because the one thing that everybody kept trying to do was push out Burt Ward, and especially in the third season, ABC wanted Robin gone altogether, as well as Chief O'Hara, and Dozier fought for them.
Well, this would be a case where it'd be a Robin episode, right? Because the Scotland Venerable Ireland Yard is not going to request Batman and Batgirl. Right. They're going to request Batman and Robin. Right. Although having Batgirl along, she, as a librarian, she would probably be really familiar with the stories. And if we were going to incorporate more of the story elements in there, she could produce, some great little nuggets of information. And, in this story, that happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could do that, and then adding little things where she just sort of shows up, which seems to have been the want during the third season. She didn't drive the plot along as much in a lot of the stories. She just sort of showed up and either offered information or helped along in the fight, and then would disappear.
And the Londinium episodes gave us a legitimate reason for her to be all the way on the other side of the pond. She had trained, her father wanted her to come and take a vacation as well. This doesn't really offer an opportunity for much of that, unless you want to really come up with some legit reason. Like she's studying, perhaps she's attending an international librarians conference at Oxford University.
There you go.
Or something like that, and she could be along.
Mm-hmm. That works out. And then she just sort of, it's not one of these things where she's like, I'm coming along because I'm following Batman maybe this time. Maybe it's just she happens to be there as well. And then she stumbles into the case.
I could see her. This is such a 60s thing, in a very cute pseudo Sherlock Holmes cape and deerstalker and things like that. You can, because the Batgirl wears a cape. What if she traded it out for something with a herringbone plaid pattern or something? Do you like my new cape, Batman? I picked it up on Barnaby Street.
All right, then. So, as a fourth season, we've got Batgirl working in there as well. We've got our titles. We've got our potential, star in it and all, our guest star, guest villain. So as we wrap up this episode of the Batcave podcast, Kevin, if people want to talk to you more about this, they want to learn more about your podcast and your writings, what's the best way of going about it?
Probably to go to my Facebook page, Kevin Lauderdale. I'll be the guy wearing the sunglasses in the profile picture looking. And if you click on the link, it's this guy's talking about old time movies. He's talking about old time radio shows. He's talking about 1970s and 60s TV shows. Yes, that's the right Kevin Lauderdale. There's also kevinlauderdale.livejournal.com, which is mostly where I post links to my episodes of Presenting the Transcription Feature, the podcast you can hear right here on the Chronic Rift Network almost twice a month.
Yes, indeed. Kevin, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this. And, folks, we're doing this. I'm trying to show, release the episodes in the order of the comics, from the start, or the earliest to the most recent issues that we're going to be talking about here. So I'm not entirely sure where in the run we are. But as we're recording this, Kevin was the first one of the batch. So this is sort of the trial run. And I think it worked very well.
All the good stuff on the other episodes came from me. All the bad stuff, well, just got cut out.
There you go. So stay tuned, folks. We will be back very shortly with a new episode. In fact, we'll be back tomorrow with a new episode as part of our 12 Days of Batmas. Make sure you're following along by subscribing on one of our great, podcasting apps, from Apple to Google to Spotify to Amazon. I've got them all there, and you can find it very easily. And if not, let me know. I'll remedy that very quickly. But I think I've got all the bases covered there. Until then, folks, have yourselves a great day. Kevin, once again, thank you so much for being here.
God save the Queen, citizens.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day.
Well, come what may. Merry Christmas, Mr. Wayne.
Merry Christmas, Albert. Goodwill toward men.